Welcome, and thank you for taking the time to learn more about the Hope Teacher Rating Scale. This PowerPoint is meant to give you a basic overview on the Hope Scale, how it works, what it measures, and how teachers should proceed in using it for K-5 gifted and talented student identification. Before we begin, we need to acknowledge the Jack Kent Cooke Foundation for their generous support of the development of the Hope Scale and its ongoing research efforts. The Hope Scale in general is a teacher rating instrument designed to identify elementary age gifted and talented students. How it was originally conceptualized is two researchers, Marcia Gentry and myself, Scott Peters, used it to help teachers at a career and technical education center locate students of talent who would not be noticed via traditional means. And because of that, we went through the literature and found a variety of typically observed behaviors that are easily observed by teachers in an educational setting, and created a kind of a large list to give teachers a sense of who it is that they were looking for when they were nominating talented students in whatever field they were in. And we found that was very successful. And because of that, we decided to take it a step further and develop those instruments, those items, those behaviors and characteristics into a standardized kind of instrument that might help teachers create more accurate assessments of gifted and talented students in the elementary grades. The Hope Scale measures two broadly defined subscales, which we'll look at next, academic and social concepts, and is meant to be completed by a student's classroom teacher. So this is what the Hope Scale looks like. As you can see, it only has 11 items plus a 12th item meant for teachers to indicate specific areas in which they have observed these behaviors. So for example, it's very possible that you might have students in your classes who really only exhibit some of these characteristics in math, or maybe only in the arts, or maybe only in instances where they're allowed to work kind of individually or self-paced, in which case you might use the other category and indicate that. But that's a very important area because it tells us where you notice these behaviors. Also on the bottom is where you can include any specific notes about behaviors you've noticed or specific instances. And then on the top, very important information, any background information you have. In the past, we've seen schools who have printed labels with all this information and then place them on the top of the Hope Scale. That way a teacher does not have to fill out these individual components. And that tends to work very well as it allows a teacher to complete the instrument much more quickly without having to spend so much time filling out basic demographics. Although the Hope Scale appears as if it's one single instrument, it's actually measuring two rather distinct subscales, an academic subscale and a social subscale. Now, it's very important that although these do appear on one instrument, they should not be summed together to make one large score. Instead, they should kind of be taken separately and to produce really two different subscale scores that could be used in further identification. You can see the items on the left, items 1, 6, 7, 9, 10, and 11 make up the academic scale, and items 2, 3, 4, 5, and 8 make up the social subscale. The first step to be completed when using the Hope Scale for identification in your school is to make sure that the top component is completed for all students in any given grade level. So this should not be completed on students whom a teacher or a coordinator already thinks perhaps is gifted. Instead, this should be completed as a universal screener on all students. So the first step is to complete the top demographic information. And this is, as we said earlier, very often something that can be done with a label. If there's an office administrative personnel person or a data person who can print off labels for all the students in your class that contain the student name, perhaps student ID number, teacher name, as well as any demographic information. That often helps this process go a lot faster because a teacher can just take those stickers, put them right across the top there, and then rate the students instead of spending easily half of as much time again just completing that demographics information. One of the most important steps, if not the most important step or consideration when using the Hope Scale, is indicated in the only instructions on the page, which come directly below the demographic area. And that is that you should rate each of your students as compared to other children of similar age, background, experience, culture, and environment. And age is probably very similar because likely you're teaching all students who are in the same grade level. However, that doesn't mean all of these students have had the exact same prior life experiences. For example, some very high-income students are likely to demonstrate more of these characteristics because they've had more opportunities to develop them. Because of that, we like to make as close of comparisons as possible. So if you have certain students who have had shared cultural backgrounds, those students should be compared to each other. To a certain extent that you know free and reduced lunch or income information, you should try to compare those students to each other so that you can get the most accurate reference group. So as you're going through and rating each individual child, consider the child's experiences, consider their behaviors that they've demonstrated to you over however long you've known the student and been teaching that student, and try to compare that student to all others who you've worked with that are similar in age, background, experience, culture, and environment over your teaching career. The idea is to compare students who are as close to each other as possible, because that will give you an indication of who learns faster, who learns more deeply, regardless of their prior life experiences. Your next step is to proceed to the rating of the individual items for each of the students in your class. When rating your students, with the consideration in mind that we've already mentioned, it's important to consider this as a 6-point rating system. So there is no positive or negative, it's not good or bad that students have or do not have or demonstrate these characteristics. It's just a matter of how often you've observed them. So don't think of something as, well, I like this student a lot, but I don't think they have these characteristics, and don't feel bad because they maybe only get a 3 or a 4. There's nothing wrong with that. It just means you haven't observed these characteristics in your experience, and that's fine. When you go through, consider this question: how often or to what degree do the students exhibit these behaviors? 6 would be, I'm constantly seeing these behaviors. They're often daily demonstrating these behaviors to me, down to 1, which is I've really never seen a student demonstrate this behavior. Your last step when rating each child is to consider this bottom section, which is where you should include any notes or suggestions or comments that you have for whoever's going to be going through these forms in order to complete identification decisions. So if there is a student for whom you believe has a talent that this is not adequately evaluating, if there are skills or behaviors that are important to know about for an individual who's going to be making a placement decision, any information that you believe would be helpful to the individual who will be making placement decisions should be included here on the bottom. Finally, if you're interested in finding out more information about Project Hope, the Hope Scale, or the Jack Kent Cooke Foundation, please visit the Project Hope website at Purdue University.